You are a master stone carver in Thebes, and the year is 1270 BCE. The air is thick with the dust of the quarries and the scent of the sacred incense burning in the temples. The pharaoh, Ramses II, has returned from his campaign against the Hittites, and you have been summoned to the great temple of Karnak for a task that will define your life's work. You are to carve a story into the very skin of the temple walls, a story so immense, so glorious, that it will echo for eternity. Your hands tremble as you take up your chisel. You are to depict the pharaoh at the Battle of Kadesh, a living god on the battlefield, a towering inferno of divine fury. You are to show him abandoned by his cowardly men, surrounded by thousands of enemy chariots, calling upon his father, the god Amen. You are to carve the moment Amen answers, filling the king with a power beyond mortal men, allowing him to single-handedly slaughter his enemies and seize an impossible victory. But as your chisel meets the stone, a cold dread settles in your stomach, because you have heard the whispers from the soldiers who returned, broken and silent. You know the story you are carving is a lie. You're not just carving stone. You're preserving the physical embodiment of a monumental cover-up. A lie designed to mask a catastrophic blunder, a devastating slaughter, and a shameful tactical failure born from the blinding ambition of a single man. This isn't the story of a divine triumph. This is the story of the battlefield crime that created a legend. Before diving into the dark truths hidden by this glorious facade, if you enjoy exploring the forgotten corners of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please, comment below to let me know where you're watching from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. The legend of Kadesh. To understand the crime, you must first understand the legend. And to understand the legend, you must understand the pharaoh who forged it, Ramses II. Ascending to the throne in 1279 BCE, he inherited the most powerful empire on earth, yet he was consumed by an ambition that bordered on mania. He was not content to merely rule. He was determined to become a living god, a name that would dwarf that of his formidable father, Seti I. His entire world was defined by one great geopolitical struggle against the rising Hittite Empire to the north. For decades, the two superpowers were locked in a cold war for control of the Levant. The crown jewel of this contested land was a fortress city called Kadesh. It was the key to Syria. His father had taken it, only to lose it. For Ramses, retaking Kadesh was more than strategy. It was a personal obsession, the means by which he would eclipse his father's ghost. In the 5th year of his reign, he marshaled an army of some 20,000 men, divided into 4 divisions named for Egypt's great gods: Amun, Ra, Ptah, and Set. It was a rolling city of infantry and chariotry, the very embodiment of Egyptian might. The official story of what happened next, an epic known as the Poem of Pentar, was a narrative Ramses would have carved with obsessive detail across Egypt's most sacred temples at Karnak, Luxor, Abydos, and his masterpiece, Abu Simbel. According to this glorious record, as Ramses neared Kadesh, his men captured 2 nomads who claimed the terrified Hittite king, Muwatalli II, was cowering over 100 miles away. Believing the story his ambitious heart desperately wanted to hear, Ramses raced ahead with only his lead division, the Amun, leaving the other 3 strung out for miles behind him. He made his camp, victory seemingly in his grasp. But it was a devastatingly effective trap. The nomads were Hittite spies. Just as Ramses settled his camp, his scouts captured 2 actual Hittite scouts who revealed a terrifying truth. The entire Hittite army, with its allies, was hidden just behind the city of Kadesh. Muwatalli hadn't just brought an army. He had assembled what some ancient accounts claim was the largest chariot force in history. Then, disaster. Thousands of Hittite chariots, thundered from their hiding place and slammed into the unsuspecting Ra division, which was still on the march and completely unprepared. The division was shattered and sent fleeing in panic toward Ramses' camp. The Hittites pursued them, crashing through the Ammon division's defenses and throwing the entire camp into chaos. This is where the official story pivots from disaster to divinity. In the poem of Pentar, Ramses claims he was utterly alone, abandoned by his men. Surrounded, he prayed to the god Ammon, who supposedly answered. Filled with divine strength, Ramses claims he single-handedly charged the Hittite lines 6 times, a storm of righteous fury. "I was like Monthu," he proclaimed. "I made them fall into the water, just as the crocodiles fall in." The reliefs show him as a giant, his enemies crushed like twigs. This solo charge, the legend claims, held off the Hittites long enough for reinforcements to arrive and help turn the tide, forcing a bloody Hittite retreat. This was the story that made him Ramses the Great, a hero king, the personal instrument of the gods. The cracks in the facade. For centuries, the story carved on the temple walls was accepted as fact, but history is rarely written by a single voice. In the ruins of the Hittite capital, Hattusa, archaeologists unearthed clay tablets that told a very different story. From the Hittite perspective, the battle was not a glorious Egyptian victory. In fact, they also claimed to have won. Their records describe how King Muwatalli II brilliantly outmaneuvered the arrogant young pharaoh, luring him into a perfectly executed ambush and shattering the Egyptian advance. They frame Ramses' countercharge not as a heroic turning point, but as the frantic struggle of a man already defeated, fighting simply to survive. The most damning piece of evidence is the outcome. After the battle, Ramses retreated south, back to Egypt. The prize he had risked everything for, the city of Kadesh, remained firmly in Hittite hands. Here we have our first major crack. 2 empires claiming victory, while the campaign's strategic objective was an undeniable failure for Egypt. But the plot thickens. 15 years after the battle, in 1258 BCE, Ramses II and the new Hittite king, Hattusili III, signed a formal peace treaty. A copy of this, now recognized as the world's first surviving international peace agreement, was discovered in the Hittite archives, and a replica hangs in the United Nations headquarters today. The text of the treaty is astonishing. It doesn't read like an agreement between a clear victor and a vanquished foe. It is a treaty between equals. It establishes non-aggression, and more importantly, a mutual defense alliance. Both kings swear to aid the other if attacked by a third party or if they face internal rebellion. This document raises a profound and troubling question. Why would a triumphant pharaoh, who claimed to have crushed his enemy, sign a treaty 16 years later that treats his supposedly defeated foe as an equal partner? Victors dictate terms. They do not negotiate alliances of mutual desperation. The treaty reveals the truth not of a stunning victory, but of a long grinding war that had exhausted both empires. The Battle of Kadesh was a bloody stalemate that led to over a decade of further skirmishes that broke neither side. Peace was a necessity born from mutual exhaustion and a shared fear of the rising Assyrian Empire to the east. And then there is the strangest clue of all, the silence of the battlefield itself. The Battle of Kadesh is described as a colossal clash, yet despite extensive archaeological surveys, no definitive proof of the battle has ever been found. No destruction layer, no caches of weapons, no mass graves. While this absence of evidence isn't definitive proof of absence, especially for mobile battles in this era, it adds another layer of unsettling mystery. The ground where thousands supposedly fell is eerily silent. The investigation, ambition, slaughter, and the cover-up. When you strip away the legend, a new narrative emerges. This isn't a story of a god on the battlefield. It's a story of a young pharaoh whose blinding ambition led to a military catastrophe. This is the story of his battlefield crime. Let's return to the moment Ramses received the false intelligence. An experienced commander would have sent his own scouts. He would have kept his divisions close. Ramses did neither. Desperate to prove himself greater than his father, he took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. His decision to rush ahead with a single division was a stunning act of negligence, a failure of the most basic principles of command. This was his first crime, placing his hunger for glory above the safety of his men. The result was the annihilation of the Ra division. When thousands of Hittite chariots slammed into their flank, the surprise was absolute. The division wasn't just defeated. It was torn asunder, ceasing to exist as an effective fighting force. This is the event at the core of the cover-up. The heroic tale of Ramses's lone stand was a desperate attempt to distract from this catastrophic loss of life, a loss for which he alone was responsible. His account, blaming his fleeing troops, is a classic act of blame-shifting. He portrayed himself as the victim of his army's cowardice, when his army was the victim of his incompetence. But the greatest and most undeniable crime was the cover-up that followed. Ramses's true genius was not displayed on the battlefield, but in the propaganda war he waged for the rest of his 66-year reign. He returned to Egypt not with Kadesh, but with a story. The poem of Pentor and the reliefs were a meticulously crafted piece of political spin. He had the story carved on temple after temple, an ideological campaign of immense sophistication. By framing the battle as him alone against the world, he erased the memory of the slaughtered Ra division. By emphasizing his connection to Amun, he placed his actions beyond mortal criticism. It was a lie so grand and so relentlessly repeated that it became the truth. This myth saved his reign and defined it, transforming him into Ramses the Great. So, what was the battlefield crime of this Egyptian god? It was a crime of ambition, a reckless gamble that led his men into a slaughter for his own glory. It was a crime of leadership, a catastrophic failure he refused to acknowledge. And the final, greatest crime was against history itself, a masterful propaganda campaign that buried his blunder under tons of carved stone. The legend of Ramses at Kadesh is not a story of victory. It is the story of a tactical draw at best, a strategic defeat at worst, spun into a myth of divine power. Ramses's true genius was as a master of public relations who understood that if you tell a lie loudly and beautifully enough, it becomes legend. The ultimate irony is that the peace treaty, the very document that exposes the cracks in his story, was perhaps his greatest achievement. It ushered in decades of peace and prosperity. But that is a story of a diplomat, not a warrior god. For over 3,000 years, the secret of Kadesh has been hiding in plain sight, obscured by the very grandeur of the lie. The tale of Ramses the Great is a chilling testament to the power of a single narrative to shape history, leaving us with one haunting question. What other truths still lie buried beneath the sands of Egypt, hidden by the glorious legends of its gods and kings?